Kiara, and welcome to my presentation on the influence of demographic characteristics and work group numbers on the relationship between unwanted interruptions and the productivity of office building users. My name is Eziaku Rashid. I am with the School of Built Environment, Mercy University. The work I'll be presenting today is the product of a collaboration between three universities: Mercy University, Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, and Griffith University, Australia. Considerable effort has been expended over recent decades to understand how the physical environment of office buildings influence not just the comfort of workers, but also their productivity. This has resulted in researchers looking into different aspects of the physical environment like the temperature, lighting, acoustics, architectural or technical aspects to see how they can be influenced or manipulated to ensure that workers are comfortable, their health and well-being is improved, as well as them being productive. Interestingly, less attention has actually been given to acoustics in comparison to temperature, lighting, and other aspects of the indoor environment quality. While few past works have tried to look into aspects of acoustics, in particular unwanted interruptions, and how they influence productivity of occupants, much effort has been put on other aspects of the indoor environment quality. For us as researchers, we got it prompted to look into this aspect by an interview of David Astle, who is the author of the book Rewarding the Brain. During his interview, he mentioned that you would need 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to track after a mere 2 minutes of topic interruption. Now, this statement struck a chord, not just because of the amount of time and the perception of the duration, but because it echoes our experiences as office workers. No wonder many authors, seem to work on their novels in a remote area like Garden Shed or a remote part of the country. Focus groups in organizations seek out a retreat in order to hammer out policies. And even academics, we tend to pine for the mythical quality time in order to conduct and write up our research. Now, all of this is in recognition to the fact that we need to avoid off-topic interruptions in order to focus and complete tasks at hand. As such, we have looked into the research we have done over the years, starting by a pilot study done by George Bird, one of the contributors to this paper. In his book titled Sustainable Buildings in Practice, he looked into 29 buildings across the world. We looked at the data he collected over the years, in particular unwanted interruptions and the influence it had on occupants' productivity. In this pilot study, we found that out of 29 buildings, 20 buildings perceived an increase in productivity when they received less unwanted interruptions. For the remaining 9 buildings that perceived a decrease in their productivity, they had a higher number or higher level of unwanted interruptions. This finding encouraged us to look into our current database and look at the relationship between unwanted interruptions and productivity. We looked at 2 questions that were asked in our database. For productivity, we asked the question for occupants to estimate how they think their productivity at work is increased or decreased by the environmental conditions in their office environment. For acoustics, we looked at the question that targeted unwanted interruptions. Our database includes 68 buildings and over 5,000 office workers. We tested the relationship between unwanted interruptions and productivity regarding the age of the occupants, the gender of the occupants, and how many people they get to share an office space with. Interestingly, the findings from our main study tend to support what we found in our pilot study. As shown in the figure here, you can see that for occupants who were 30 years and below, they recorded higher perceived productivity when they had a lesser frequency of unwanted interruptions. Now, this is as opposed to occupants that were 30 years above. They perceived that their productivity were less increased when they had more unwanted interruptions. We also checked out gender. We wanted to see if male and female, if they would think alike. Interestingly, men recorded less unwanted interruptions and higher productivity, while female recorded less productivity and higher unwanted interruption, also supporting the notion that when we have more unwanted interruption, there is a tendency for the productivity of occupants to be reduced. We looked at how many people share office space with, and the trend seemed to be similar. Those who shared offices with more people recorded a higher number of or higher frequency of unwanted interruption as opposed to those who were either alone in their office spaces or shared the office space with less number of people. These findings supported the pilot study as well as the notion that with less unwanted interruption, the productivity of occupants will be enhanced or increased. We have carried out further analysis to look at correlations in terms of work groups and the significance of this influence between unwanted interruptions and the productivity of occupants. And the findings will be published in a journal that is coming out soon. We also looked at the design intent of the buildings that we have in our database. That's whether they have been designed to be sustainable as opposed to conventional building, as well as commercial buildings and academic buildings. So what are we trying to say? Our findings have shown that there is significant negative correlation between the productivity of occupants and unwanted interruptions between all groups of workers in our database that we have tested. In other words, the more frequent the unwanted interruptions are, the worse the productivity scores are. There was also significant difference between the groups, that's in age, gender, and work groups, regarding the mean ratings in their perceived productivity and unwanted productivity and unwanted interruptions. Our findings contradict conventional wisdom that says that the bigger work groups improve overall user performance because they enhance these collaborations between workers where they talk to each other and ideas tend to come up from those collaborations. Our findings tend to say that even though collaborations may be beneficial, the unwanted interruptions would influence the productivity of occupants. It means that occupants of office spaces do want that time without interruptions in order to focus on their work. So what are we trying to say here? What we're trying to say that acoustic design, and in particular interruptions and distractions, is an important aspect of the office environment because it has a significant influence on the productivity and performance of office users and workers. Further research is required in this area to see in what form this relationship is, and also look at different aspects of office workers, commercial buildings, institutional buildings, bigger work groups, and so on. We have to be cautious in the use of the findings we have here. We would like to state that the findings we have described here are perceived reports and not actual reports of this relationship. I hope you have enjoyed our presentation. We would like to thank all those that have contributed to the production of this report or this paper. In particular, we have to thank the developer of the BUS questionnaire that has been used to carry out this research, as well as the interviewee, that's David Astor, who has prompted our interest in conducting this research. We look forward to answering your questions in the Q&A section during the conference. Thank you all for listening.